Today's daf is daf nun beis. We are going to begin now on the Mishnah. Yisem shesamchu etzel balabais. So the Mishnah Yisem shesamchu etzel balabais with regards to the regular Yisemim who are living with a balabais who takes care of all their needs and affairs, even if neither the father nor the Beis Din officially appointed them, but they just rely on this balabas. Or if the father appointed a apitropis for this Yisemim, so the din is chayav la'aseh pereseim. This person is obligated to take meiser from their produce. So again, the Yusemim, they didn't officially appoint the balabas, but they rely on him. Or the father appointed the apitropis for them, so this person is obligated to take meiser. With regards to an apitropis who was appointed by the orphan's father, Yishava, so when he returns all the property to the orphans upon their reaching, when they become adult, he has to take a shvua that he took nothing of theirs from himself. However, Beis Din, if the Beis Din appointed them to serve as apitropos la yishava, then he doesn't have to swear. Abba Shalom says no. Chiluf advarim. You have to reverse the opinions. A apitropos appointed by Beis Din has to take a shvua, but an apitropos appointed by Yisemim is not required to do so. So the Mishnah says that apitropos is obligated to take off shvua. That the apitropos is obligated to take meiser of the Yisemim in his charge. They asked a question, they asked a stira from a brisa. The brisa says, in regards to truma of the meiser, it says the truma you give to a meiser, given by a levi to a meiser, it says atem, you. In other words, v'lo shutfim, which teaches not your partners, meaning that one partner may not separate truma on behalf of the other partner. Atem v'lo arisin, atem v'lo apitrapan, v'lo atenim shalei. So it says you, not sharecroppers, you separate truma but not apitrapas, you separate truma but not one who separates truma from produce that is not his. So how can the Mishnah say that a apitrapas is able to do so and is even required to take meiser from the Yisemim when the produce does not belong to him? So here the Mishnah is dealing with a apitropis of meiser that the orphans produce in order to feed them. In other words, since he's not permitted to feed them things which are not taken meiser, the chum allowed to take meiser that which he gives them to eat. However, the brisa is referring to the produce that is not needed for the orphan sustenance. Rather, the apitropis wishes to put it aside in a state of meiser. Since he's not the owner of the produce, he lacks the authority to take meiser. Tanya is taught in a brisa that this distinction is made based on whether the apitropis intends to feed them produce to the orphans or to store it. Apitropos term in the meiser it says apitropos can separate truma and meiser from the produce of the orphans in their charge in order to feed the produce to them, but not with the intention to put it aside. And the apitropos may sell the orphans' possessions for them as follows: cattle, all these things are. So when it comes to cattle, male, female, slaves, houses, fields, and vineyards, it's all in order to feed the orphans so that they will have something to eat immediately, but not with the intention of putting aside the proceeds for future use. And they may also sell produce, wine, oil, and flour. Okay, the Brisa continues, and also the apitropos make the following items that are required for fulfillment of the mitzvah of the orphans from the property of a lulav, a arav, a sukkah, and any item for the mitzvah that involves a fixed expense. Shafer, to include a shafer. And they may purchase a sefer teda, and anything that has a fixed amount. The Brisa continues, but apitropos may not undertake to give tzedakah on behalf of the orphans, and they may not redeem captives on the behalf of their property, and they may not do anything with the orphan's property that does not involve a fixed expense. This comes to include that which is brought to come from mourners. A apitropos may not use property belonging to the Yisem in his charge for this purpose. The Brisa continues, apitropos are not permitted to involve themselves in litigation. In this case, if the purpose is to accept obligation to secure gain of the property, of the property of their orphans. In this case, the Gemara asks, why may they not enter litigation to secure gain? Rather, this means that apitrapos are not permitted to involve themselves in litigation to which they will accept financial obligation upon the orphan's estate, even if they do so in order to ultimately secure gain for the property of the orphans. Brisa continues, apitrapos are not permitted to sell a field belonging to the orphans which is located in a distant place, and use the proceeds to redeem a field that their father has sold in a nearby place. But similarly, they're not permitted to sell a bad field and use the proceeds to redeem a good. The reason is that perhaps the bought fields will become blighted, and they will turn out that the apitrapos has caused the orphans a loss with this purchase. Bryce continues, and apitrapos are not permitted to sell fields belonging to the orphans and use the proceeds to purchase slaves. But they may sell the orphan slaves and use their proceeds to purchase fields, as land is considered to be more stable assets. Shimon Gamliel argues and says that apitrapos may not even sell slaves and use the proceeds to purchase fields, because perhaps it will turn out that the property is not secure, the ownership of the fields being contested by others, and consequently the apitrapos will have made matters more complicated for the orphans as a result of the purchase. Rice continues, apitrapos are not permitted to free slaves belonging to the same in their charge, even if it's necessary to do so for any reason. They may sell them to others, and then those others may free them. Rabbi says, I say that even he, the slave himself, may give his own monetary value to the apitrapos and thereby go free, due to the fact that it's as if the apitrapos sold the slave to the slave himself. And the apitrapos must calculate with the orphans in the end when they reach adulthood, and he hands over the property to them. At that time, he calculates all the expenses and income generated of the property during the period that he served as a apitrapos. He's not required to do so. Doesn't have to. Next thing is, the basin does not appoint women, slaves, or minors as apitrapos. But if the father or the orphans appointed one of them as the orphans apitrapos, then he is allowed to. There was a certain apitrapos who was in the mayor's neighborhood to have a he was selling land belonging to the orphans and purchasing slaves with the proceeds, and the mayor did not allow to do so, as we know is practice to contrary halacha. Now, they showed him in a dream that I wish to destroy and you build. He understood this as a sign that Hashem wanted the orphans to suffer financial collapse, and therefore it would be preferable to allow the apitrapos to continue this practice. The Gemara says, even so, the mayor paid no attention to the dream. Almar, he says, when it comes to dreams, they do not bring up, they do not take down. In other words, they should not be taken into consideration. Next story, it's another incident involving a mayor. The Gemara says there were two people who incited by Satan, would argue with each other every Friday afternoon at twilight. The mayor happened to come to the place where they argued, and he stopped them from fighting there Friday afternoon at twilight until finally he made peace between them. He then heard Satan saying, woe to the mayor, remove that man, the Satan, from his house. This indicates that Satan himself lives amongst those who have machlekes. There was a certain apitrapos who was in the neighborhood of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. They were called Zabin, out of a Zabin Torah. There was a certain apitrapos who was in the neighborhood of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who was selling land and buying oxen on behalf of the orphans. And he didn't say anything to the apitrapos to the fact that he was acting improperly. So the Rabbi S and the Gemara explains that Rabbi Levi holds, in according to the opinion that Rabbi S said, And all my days I did not call my wife, nor my ox, rather I call my wife my home, because she is the essence of my home. I call my ox my field, because the primary force behind the enhancement of the field is the ox that pulls it. Similarly, Reb Shimon Levi maintains that purchasing oxen to work the land is considered like purchasing land itself, and that consequently a mechah should not be raised against the apitrobos who sold land belonging to the orphans in order to purchase oxen with the proceeds. Next story, there was a orphan who lived with an old woman who had an ox. She had an ox. She took it and sold it on their behalf. So again, there was orphans who lived with an old woman who had an ox, and she took it and sold it on their behalf. Also, so those orphans came to Rabbi Nachman and said to him, "What is she doing selling the orphan's property? Who authorized her to do so?" Nachman said to them, "We learned in the Mishnah, if orphans are living with a balabayas, that official appointment as a apitrobos is not necessary. The fact that the Yisraelim lived with the woman and she took care of them is enough to bestow upon her the authority of a apitrobos." So the craven now came with more objections to the sale. But didn't the animal afterwards increase in value, which is reason to invalidate the transaction? So the Nachman answered, the animal increased in value while possession of the buyer, and this is not considered as a loss suffered by the orphans. The relative said to him, but they did not yet receive the money, and the sale should be incomplete. So Nachman said to them, if so, he says that orphan's property is like hektish, and it's fully acquired. It's not like hektish, and it's fully acquired only with the transfer of since they did not receive the money, they can raise the purchase price or renege on the entire sale. Next story, Chamra de Ravna Ukvi Yasmi. This is related to those who came to buy the wine of Ravna Ukva. The orphan pulled it. Again, it is related to those who came to buy the wine of Rabbi Ukva. The orphan pulled it into the possession after having agreed on a purchase price. So they agreed on the price of 4 dinars, but before the buyer actually paid for the wine, it increased the value, and the price stood at 6 dinars per barrel. Also, it says orphan's property is considered like hektish, and it's fully acquired only with the transfer money. So the buyers pay the current higher price, or the sale can be rendered void. The Gemara records several additional halachas relating to this topic. If the buyer pulled into their possession produce belonging to the orphans, but yet did not pay for it, and afterwards the produce became higher. This is the din of Chanilai Bar Idi. Orphan's property is fully acquired only with the transfer of money. Until payment is made by transaction, it can still be rendered void. Zul, but if the produce decreased in value and the buyer wished to renege on the sale, so one can argue the power of hektish should not be greater than of hektish. So too, the power of orphans should not be less than that of other people. Since the buyer pulled the orphan's property into their possession, thereby performing an act of kinyan, the sale is valid and the buyers cannot retract. Now, if the apitrobos pulled produce into his possession on behalf of the orphans, but then yet did not pay for it, and yakar afterwards increased the value, the power of hektish should not be greater than of hektish should not be hektish. It's the same din. This would be bad for the orphans were they treated in this manner. As they might sometimes need produce and nobody will give them. And nobody will give them before they actually pay the money. It's preferable for them to be treated like other buyers who finalize the acquisition when they pull the produce into the possession. If the orphans gave money for the purchase of produce but did not yet physically transfer into the possession, afterwards the produce then decreased. So the power of the ordinary person, the seller, should not be greater than that of the hektish. Therefore, the orphans can renege on the purchase of an act of acquisition which is not yet performed. Yakar, if it increased in value and the orphans wish to uphold the sale, the students in the study hall this would be bad for the orphans where they treated this way. Why? because the Aslamim Malahu, as the sellers will come to say to them, your wheat was burned in the upper story of my house and you've lost everything. If fire breaks out, the seller will not attempt to save the produce because they already received payment for it and now belongs to the orphans. Now, if buyers give the orphans money for the purchase of the produce, yaker, if it increased in value, so why does it sometimes orphans need money and no one will give them before they actually get in the produce. So it's preferable for them to be treated like other sellers who finalize the sales only once the merchandise is pulled by the buyers. Rabashi says, Rav Kana and I signed a deed of sale for the mother of Zaira the orphan. Who, as the child's Avitrapa sold now and are first making a public announcement in order to pay the head tax. Now, they said it was permitted for her to act in this manner as due to the Chachamim of Nahardoi. When orphan's property is sold, a kola of the sales first made in order to ensure that the sellers will receive the highest price. But when the property is sold to raise money for the payment of the head tax or to provide for sustenance or to pay for burial of the deceased, the money is needed immediately. So the property may be sold even without a public announcement. Where it says Amram Tzaboy Apitropis Yasma, Amram the dyer was a apitropis for orphans. Also craving the command of Nachman, and the orphans' relatives came before him. Nachman Amalei Kolavish Mikasmi Yasmi. He said he dresses and covers himself with the clothing purchased from the property of the orphans. Nachman said, perhaps he does this in order that his word should be heard, meaning that he dresses himself in fine clothing as the orphan's expense, in order to better manage their property, as he will be ignored if he appears to be a poor person. They said to him, he eats and drinks lavishly from the orphan's property, and he's not known to be rich enough to be able to afford such large expenditures from his own money. So Nachman said to him, say perhaps that he found a lost item with the help of which he can allow himself to maintain a high standard of living. They said to him, but he's damaging the orphan's property and thereby causing financial loss. So he said to him like this, bring me witnesses that he's damaging the property. Now I'll remove him from Apitropis. That if a Apitropis is mafsid, then remove him. Hitmar Apitropis the mafsid, like it says Apitropis is mafsid. Rehuna Amar Rav Misalkin Le, the Beit of Shil Amar Misalkin Le. And Allah is that Misalkin Le. We remove him. The Mishnah teaches with regard to Apitropis was appointed by the orphan's father. When he returns all the property to the orphan upon reaching adulthood, Yishava, he has taken an oath that he took nothing for himself. My time, he loved Apitropis. If a Apitropis had not received some benefit from the father during his lifetime, he would not have agreed to become a Apitropis. And he will not come to avoid becoming a Apitropis merely because of an oath that the court will impose upon him in the sometime future. Mishnah teaches, we know, based in if the court appointed him to serve as a Apitropis, the reason for this is merely a favor that the Apitropis does for the court, as he derives no benefit accepting in this position. And if you're going to give him a shua, he's going to avoid becoming a Apitropis. Now, Abba Shalom says no. Chilav Adorim to change the opinions around. My time we knew based in Yishava. He says, what's the reason of the Beis Din appointed? Why does he have to take a shua? Since he derives a certain benefit from his appointment, the rabbim is like knows about him that he's a trustworthy person, as he demonstrates by the fact that the Beis Din relies upon him and appoints him into a position of responsibility, and he will not come to avoid becoming a Apitropis because of an oath that the court will impose on him. However, we know of the Yisem Leishava because it is merely a favor that these people do for each other. And if you're going to give him a shua, he's going to hold back and not become an Apitropis. The halacha is Ka'aba Shal. Tanya Belazar Ben Yaakov Emer Zeh Yishava halacha that both take a shua, and Allah is according to his statement. He says, in the case of an Apitropis who was appointed to that position by the father of the orphans, he takes the oath when the orphans reach adulthood and he returns the property to them. Why? Because he receives payment, he derives a certain benefit from managing the orphan's property. Do you bring a kav measure how much the apitropos earns from his efforts? Rather say that he takes an oath because it's as if he received payment. He agreed to serve as the apitropos because of the benefit that he derived from the father during the lifetime, and it's as if he received payment for accepting to be an apitropos.